Hi, in this tutorial you will learn everything about Tanstack Query, which was formerly known as React Query. You will be learning about all features this featureful library offers, such as mutations, paginated queries, invalidation, chain queries, and many more. To get started, open your VS Code terminal or any IDE's terminal and write the command yarn create. I'm going to use React, but you can use any other React library. Give a name to your project. I will be giving the name client because this is going to be my front end, and I'm going to be using React. So React, and I'll be using TypeScript here. And now go in the folder you have just created and type the command yarn. And if you're using npm, then this command will be npm install and the libraries and the packages and the dependency get installed. After the dependencies have been installed for Vite, we will now need to install dependencies for our project. These packages will include an HTTP client, .add, Axios, Tanstack, React, Query, Tanstack, React, Query, Dev Tools, and last, React Form. After you install the dependencies, we need to install this last dependency, which is JSON server package. After installing all the dependencies, your package.json file should look like this. We need to add a new script here, which will be JSON server db.json. Now we need to create a db.json file. This will be our mock database, and we can create to-dos, and let's say it will have an ID, ID 1, title, title 1. I will provide the db.json file in the description. You can just copy and paste it. After creating the db.json file, open the terminal and type the command yarn start. This should start the mock server we have just created. It has two routes, as you can see here, and we click here, and we will not be needing any CSS for this project, so we will now delete the files. Let's empty it and let's delete it here. Delete file, and we need to remove from here also, and we will not be needing any of these things here which we had imported, which came with a boilerplate code. So we will now have an empty. First, I will show you using the old way of fetching data. Fetching data old way. We will need to import two things. First is Axios, and we will also need to import use effect from React. And let's now create a function fetch data, which will be an asynchronous function, and will return await Axios dot get HTTP localhost 3000 dot data. After creating the function, we will consume it in a use effect hook. Now open your terminal again and go to the client directory and write the command yarn dev and go, and this page will open, and I know this will be empty, and you can go to the console log, and we have made a mistake here. We actually need to fetch not localhost 3000, we actually need to fetch localhost 3000 slash todos, and we come back here and refresh and see the console here. As you can see, we have fetched the data. Same. We can show the fetch data in a state const data set data equal to use state hook from React, and we can initially set it to null. Okay, and we can come here and we rather than okay, we can instead of console logging, we can do this set data to data. Let's rename this to b and we can come here and go like this JSON those 25 data. Okay, and if you come here, as you can see, we are now able to see the retrieve data. First is null and we fetch it, but there's an issue with this. Let's come here and open the networks tab. If we come here, as you can see, we actually hit the API twice. This can cause some performance issue. Also, there's another problem we need to face is that to, to check for the loading and for errors, we will need to create different states for each of them, right? A lot of boilerplate code, but this all can be solved using the React Query package. Start using the new way. So let's come to the source folder and create a new folder, services, and let's create another folder named types and create a folder for to do for ts export interface to do, and let's come here and let's compare the schema for our to-dos. So our to-do has only two items, id, which is going to be a number, and title, which is going to be a string. And let's add this here because id might not be present, it might be auto-generated. We will discuss it later on. What I mean by auto-generated is that when we create a new to-do, the ID will be auto-generated, but when we create it, we give the information to create a to-do, we will not be providing ID. Let's rename the file here to, let's convert to lowercase, and let's create a new file in the services folder named api.ts, and let's create a const here, which is going to be our base URL. Okay, it's going to be HTTP localhost 3000. Let's import Axios here, and let's create an Axios instance. Axios instance is equal to axios.create URL equal to base URL. It's not going to be a URL, it's going to be base URL here. My apologies. And now let's create a function get to do ID. It's going to be like this, and it's going to be an error function. It's going to return Axios instance dot get, and the URL we're going to pass here is going to be to-dos dot, and let's create let's add a sync here. We're going to be adding an await here, and we're going to do this here, await dot data, and this is going to return the data from the to-dos route, and we're going to map this data I think it's here, from here. So now we're going to map this data in e. Let's change this to item and item dot id. Sorry, forgot to add this here. So now we have this is now returning IDs of all the to-dos we have in our database. It's finally time to write your first query, and we're gonna create a new file here named queries.ts. Let's start by importing the use query hook from React Query. Import use query, okay, from React Query, and let's export function use to do IDs, because we are creating an query for getting the IDs from a database of to-dos, and we are going to return use query hook, okay, and use query hook takes two parameters, query key and query function. In query key we can pass anything like a string or a number, and the query function we need to pass the function which we had uh, written in api.ts file. So we're gonna import it. Import from API, and the name of the function was get to do IDs, and we're gonna give it here. And we have successfully written our first query. The query key can be anything. We can pass anything here, like we passed to do's here. We could have passed anything, like any string here. Let's say I pass s string, sa string, but we need to make sure this is something we can remember easily, because we are going to use this string to revalidate our query. Let's zoom in a little bit to help see more clearly. The exported function is smart enough to guess the type which we are returning. As you can see, we are returning number because we had the IDs are numbers here. So our application is smart enough to understand that we are going to be returning number or undefined. Also enable or disable our query by passing the passing and boolean here. Let's say we say true or false here. Better approach for doing this would be, let's pass some boolean here. Let's say we pass enabled. It's going to be a boolean type here. No, let's write is enabled. What this is going to do is, if is enabled is true, the query will be enabled. If is enabled is false, the query will be disabled. So even if we run the function, the query will not refetch or is not going to run anyways if the is enabled is false. We have another parameter which we should add, that is refetch on window focus. Okay, let's set this to false. So what this does is, every time the user loses the focus from our tab or our project, it refetches from the backend. We are going to disable it. There are a lot of other parameters which we can set for our use query hook, such as retry delay, and other such parameters. But for now, we are going to only use these. We now need to wrap our app component inside the query client provider. So we now need to go to our main.tsx file, and let's import from here. Import query client provider, and here if you go here, and let's, after wrapping our app component, we now need to import the query client. We now need to initialize it. Query client is equal to new query client. We need to set some default options here. For queries, retry is gonna be 5. Retry delay is gonna be, let's say, 5,000. So it's gonna retry after every 5 seconds, and we're gonna pass this client to client here. Now it's gonna be a good time to import the DevTools. So import from dev React Query DevTools, and we're gonna pass it here. And for initial open, we're gonna set it to true. Normally, we should not set initial open to true, And I think we should change the React retry delay to 1000. So now let's choose the use to do IDs query in our app. So if we come back here, let's delete all this code. And now let's import instead of use to do IDs from there is equal to const to do IDs is equal to use to do IDs. And let's pass to here do IDs. Now we have initialized the use to do IDs query here. We can now access a lot of values from it. Let's say we want to access the data, we can just write data and we will be able to access the data we want. Or we want to check if it's loading, we can now just check is loading and we will be able to see if the query is still fetching or loading. And if we want to check for errors, we can also do it by just writing is error. Now we are able to check for error in a simple way without creating a lot of different states, which will save us a lot of time and will make our app more optimized and more performance friendly. So now let's use these values. So now let's come here and check for to do is fetching and let's return uh, is loading. Now let's check for an error. If to do IDs dot is error, let's copy from here. There is an error. And now let's use the data. So let's map it to do IDs dot data dot map. It's gonna be, and we just want to return a p tag with I. So now let's come back. As you can see, now we have these numbers and we are querying our database with these queries. So we are retrieving this data which is now shown here, which is same as the data in our database. So to check it, we can now change one of the IDs, and let's say we change this one to 5 and this one to 8. Let's save it, and now if we retrieve it, it is changed accordingly. When we were using the old way to fetch data from the server, we had a critical error, a performance error, because we were fetching data twice even though we had made the fetch request only once. But now if we go and check in our networks tab to see how many times fetch requests has been made to our server, we can see that it has been only made once. We needed to use a question mark here because this data could have been null. Like if we remove it here, this text is gonna throw an error here. We can fix this error by changing is fetching to is pending. This is one of many examples in which we use React Query to save our time by not writing a lot of boilerplate code which we would have been needed to write if we use the old method. So let us now check the difference between the fetch status and the normal status of the data. So let us remove this code from here and let us add question mark here, and let's come here and create two p tags, and it's gonna be status fetch. It's gonna be to do IDs fetch status in status. The fetch status tells us the status of the query function, like is it running, is it idle, is it fetching. The to do IDs of status, which is basically the status of the query, it tells us is the query pending or is it successful or we ran into an error. Let us now understand this with an example. Let's open our browser and refresh the page. As you just saw, we had two states. Let me show you a better way. So let's trigger loading. While we are loading the data, basically we are fetching from the backend. The fetching function, which is a query function, is running. So we get a status. for the function that we are fetching, and for the status of the query, we get that the query is pending. And once we have completely fetched the data from the backend, we get status for the query function that it is idle, that means it's not running, and status of success shows that the query has successfully ran and we have been able to retrieve the data. If we trigger an error from here, as you can see, the status is shown as error, but the status fetch, which is the status of the query function, is still shown idle, because even if we get an error, it doesn't mean we are running the function. Let us now go back to VS Code, and now I'm going to show you another important and useful query, which is also very powerful. It is use is fetching. Is fetching equal to use is fetching. Okay, so basically what this query returns is the amount of queries which are fetching currently. Global queries, and if you come here and if we don't go back and if we reload again, as you can see, when the query is running, the 0 is turned to 1, which means one query is running. This is useful to track how many queries are actually running at the moment. Currently we only have one query, so this might not seem very useful to you, but once we have multiple queries, this will prove useful to us. As you might have noticed one thing, the to do is from here is same as what we had mentioned here. If we change the name here, let's say to do 1, if we come back, the name has changed. So this is the reason we use a query key. Basically, this key helps us identify between the multiple queries which we are running. And one thing, we can also pass an ID here. Let's pass 2 as an ID here. And if we go back, as you can see, we have to do 2. This will be useful now that we are now gonna fetch multiple queries using another powerful hook called the use queries hook. Let us now go back again to our VS Code. Let us now see how we can use parallel queries. React Query gives us another important hook, which is use queries, which will help us run these parallel queries. Up till now, we were using use to do IDs inside app.tsx, but now is a good time for us to create a separate component to display data. First, we are going to create a new folder inside the source folder called components. And inside the components folder, we are going to create a new file to do.tsx. Let's start creating a new component. Export default function to do, and we are going to return a div here. Inside the components, we are going to display 3 values: title, description, and the status. As now we have 4 values in the to-do type, so now let's go to the to-do.ts file, which is the type file from where we are exporting the to-do type and edit it. So it's going to have description. Let's copy the spellings from here. This is going to be of type string. And we have another property here, which is status. It is also of type string. Now we can go back to todo.tsx, and as you can see, the name of the function to do is same as the type name to do. So what we can do is we can say do component here to change the name, and now we can use this to do type as the type of props. Now let's display the values we received in props. First value we received is title, so we will create a p tag here. Rather than the p tag, let's create an st tag, title. And the second thing we received is the description, so let's create a description. And last but not least, we are going to display the status. As we now have created the to-do component, we should now go back to app api.tss, and now let's create another function, export const get to do. It's going to be asynchronous arrow function, and it's going to get a single to do. We also need to pass an ID here. Slash. And we are not passing this ID here. It's going to be your type number. What this function will return is the full content of a specific to-do. For example, the data return would look like this. If we pass ID 1, we will get relevant to-do from our database. Now it's time to use another powerful hook from the React Query library, the use queries hook. So let's go to queries.tss file and import use queries hook, this one, and create a new function, export function use to do, and it will take IDs, and IDs can be it can be an array of number or undefined, or it can be undefined. Okay, and we will return use query hooks. We will now need to pass our queries here. So for we are gonna map on IDs, map ID, and we're gonna return, okay, key. So we are gonna pass another query key here, and now we're gonna pass to do, and we can also pass its ID here to here, and we need to pass a query function here. So, but now we need to pass it like this, because we are gonna pass a parameter in our function which we just created. It's gonna be to do, and we need to pass an ID here, and we need to tell TypeScript that it will always be given. The value of ID will never be null or undefined. Okay, and as you can see, we are now we using this because the data we are receiving, sorry, the ID is undefined. And one way we can counter this is if we come here and do this. Now, if we have IDs, that means ID is not undefined. We are going to be mapping on IDs. But if ID is undefined, then we are going to map on an empty array. And now let's save the file. Now let's go back to app.tsx and use to do query we just created. So let's import use to do. And we also need to import the to do component we just created, to do component. And let's use the to do use to do query. To do use to do. And we need to pass the IDs here, so we are gonna pass them here. Now we can just come here and data map. So we can do this. The map of the data. Okay. Do component. We are gonna see the title here. Title, data.title, and as you can see, TypeScript is showing error because here when we are receiving the data, the title can be a string or undefined, but as we had defined to do as the type of the props, but in the to do type we had specified that title is a type string. We have not specified that it can be undefined, but we know that title will already be defined here. So what we can do is put this here, and this will tell TypeScript that title will always exist. We can do the same with others. So let's do the same for description. Data dot description status data dot status, and last but not least we also need to pass the ID here, data dot id. So now if you go back here, as you can see, we are now getting all the to-dos separately and all the data. Just now we have ran 4 different queries in parallel using the use queries hook. As you can see here, we are getting different data on each separate query. This ensures that we have ran 4 different queries in parallel to get 4 different to-do from our database.